What is up, grinders? Welcome to 2024 MMA Crunch Time. Before lock here, I am your host, Mike Brown, aka H3 Buddha. Here with my pal Liam Picks Fights. Liam, what a surprise, what a fun, well, maybe not the best quality card in the world, but hey, it's going to be a fun card. There's going to be exciting fights. There's going to be some high scores out there. Give me some of your overall thoughts on the card to kick it off here, and Happy New Year's to you, buddy.
Happy New Year's to you as well, my man, and Happy New Year's to everybody who's joining us today. I think everybody kind of feels the same way about this card. Is it the best UFC offering you've ever seen? No, it's a pretty bad one on paper. If you rank order all the UFCs this year, this is going to end up being towards the bottom. However, we've been starved of some fight action. We haven't had an opportunity to get involved the last couple of weeks, so we'll take what we can get. And when I'm looking at a fight card like this, man, what stands out as a positive, a lot of fights looking like they're going to end inside the distance on this card. Certainly that's how they're projecting it. I believe 9 out of 11 were favored to end inside the distance here. And when I'm looking at it, I see it the same way. I see a couple of them that maybe could be sneaky and go over, or fights that could be competitive, go back and forth a little bit. But I'm also seeing some fights where it just seems like violence is written all over it. Some binary matchups where if one guy's not getting to his violence, the other guy's probably getting to his violence. So those are the kind of matchups I'd look to target this week for fantasy.
I think it's pretty clear cut from a fantasy standpoint, which, specific targets we're going to be going after. And I think it's actually kind of more difficult to fade certain things. And that leads me to the first really important wave you're going to build your lineups is the main event, man. And I mean, we have a rematch, quote unquote. I think we knew where the things were supposed to be headed. And now we have a massive favorite here in Ankalaev versus Walker. We're not going to break down each entire fight, but for fantasy relevance, obviously this is going to be your starting point, Liam. And on our Ground and Pound podcast, which you definitely subscribe to and check it out because we do go fight by fight basis. I basically brought up the point that if you roster Walker, you can comfortably build whatever you want to do, Liam. Like, you can really build some very easy lineups, I would say, because once you start getting Ankalaev in, if you build a Silva, people are starting with Silva and Ankalaev. If I'm in a big field GPP, good job, guys, filling up the contest. It was 100K to first. We was supposed to be 50, so tremendous job there. But I mean, how are you going to handle this? Because from a standpoint of ownership, 40% going to Ankalaev, he's going to eat a lot of this upper echelon. I still think he has to be perfect, Liam. And, a third or a fourth round finish might not look all that great. I got to be honest, for fantasy.
This is a tricky fight to project out because we've got a rematch, right? And number one, the book just has a lot of advantages when you're coming into a rematch because they got to see where all the action came in. But on top of that, a lot of times people get oversold on what they saw in a short period of time, and they think, oh, this is a predicate for how this fight's going to play out the rest of the way. But it's not always that simple, right? Guys will change their game plan. They'll adjust. They'll, maybe do something a little bit different. But I like to try and take away what was the game plan? What were they trying to do? What were they trying to accomplish? And in that fight, Magomed Ankalaev was looking for takedowns. He actually almost got Johnny Walker down. He almost grabbed a rear naked choke very early in that fight. He was certainly looking for it. Wasn't credited with a submission attempt there, but basically he's in rear standing trying to grab a hold of his neck. I mean, there's not many other things you're trying to do there except submit somebody. So I think that when I looked at that fight, Magomed Ankalaev was trying to be all over Johnny Walker. He was trying to pressure him. He was trying to get a hold of him and bring him to the ground. I think if he does that again, he could be a really high scorer on draft or on fantasy. But when I'm looking, I also see this is a guy that is not like, consistent to push that same pace, right? Yeah. After the last time, after the disqualification, maybe he doesn't push the pedal to the floor. Maybe he's willing, like you said, to push it to a round 3 or round 4. But I think it's all dependent on whether he goes for takedowns. If he's going for takedowns here and he's getting on top, then that just seems to me like a really easy way to score a lot of points. We've seen in the past, Nikita Krylov was able to put Johnny Walker through the paces a little bit, awkward grappling fight there, and both of them ended up tiring out. So if you're fading this main event, you're hoping, hey, maybe Johnny gets on top of him 1 or 2 times. Maybe they'll mix it up a little bit and nobody blows the other out of the water. But I think if one guy was to score really well, I do think it's Ankalaev because it could be a first-round knockout or it could be from that wrestling path to victory. But I think Johnny Walker, his only chance to really have an explosive score is that early finish, round 1 or round 2.
This doesn't seem like a real cash build type if you're going to be out there in the streets building, but I mean, I just don't know how to handle this because Walker is absolutely in play. He's a crazy man and he can do crazy stuff. He's got power, but let's move on to other fights. How I'm going to personally be building my lineups is in the middle range. I think you can live there with some confidence that there's some banger fights. Let's just kind of like rank the fights. I think that would be a smart thing for the viewers here. We have 3 real bangers, I would say. You have Semmelsberger and Parsons, Bruno Ferreira and Haas, and Jim Miller and Benitez. Personally, I like the Chinny boys. I like Ferreira and Haas. I mean, how can you not? Like, these guys have gotten knocked out early and often, and that's a direct path to points. Um, closely behind that, Semmelsberger and Parsons is probably going to be projected out to be a pretty high pace of fight, Liam. You can kind of break down that. And then the last thing is Benitez and Miller. A lot of people are going to be gravitating towards this. We have Miller now at 30% owned and Benitez at 20%. I think that's going to be higher because it's easy to get these middle range in. And I have a feeling that if this thing goes to a decision for that particular fight, that's not going to look pretty. I just don't think that scores very well over 3 rounds. How are you handling this middle range in those particular 3 fights?
Yeah, I think you made a lot of the right points here. When I'm looking at the Jim Miller Gabriel Benitez fight, frankly, I feel better about the under 1.5 than I do about either side, just from a stylistic standpoint, how these guys normally approach the fight. The downside is, I believe Mowgli's coming from that southpaw stance, something that Jim Miller doesn't see a lot of. So maybe that could, make him a little more hesitant, make him make some more reads. But when I look at the fight, it just seems like 2 guys that are not afraid to get into a fight, not afraid to get into their like boxing exchanges, not afraid to get in grappling exchanges. Just seems like there's a lot of violence on the table between 2 older guys, maybe not the most durable guys that you've ever seen. But to your point, it's a fight where the cardio for both guys could kind of fall off a cliff at the 7.5 minute mark and really let you down the stretch. So you almost need those guys to maximize, or you're going to be left out in the dust on that one. As far as the other fights go, I think that you look at the Semmelsberger Parsons fight. That's what I was talking about when I said very binary, right? Mm-hmm. If Matt Semmelsberger wins the fight, it's probably going to be from 2 to 3 knockdowns, a first round knockout, just a lot of sustained success on the feet. When you look at the Preston Parsons side, though, we always talk about looking for fantasy upside with takedowns, control time, people that'll get multiple takedowns, these kind of things. And I've seen Preston Parsons get hurt, rock dropped in a million fights. But he does tend to find a way to get back on top, find a takedown, and keep working from there. And if you had to criticize Semmelsberger, the problem is he doesn't always put people away when he hurts them, right? Sometimes he lets them off the hook. And on top of that, he gets taken down frequently. He gets held down by guys that are of a lower level at times. So I think Preston Parsons actually has some upside in this fight because it's a fight where you have a welterweight over 10-1 to win the fight by knockout. For me, that just doesn't make sense mathematically. So it's like they're not giving him a chance to win by KO, even though I think he has one. His submission equity is pretty high here relative to most of the board, across the way. Mm-hmm. And if this was to be a decision, right, unlike the Jim Miller fight, unlike some of these a decision might be great for Preston Parsons, right? He's 3 rounds of top control. So I think that that's the kind of thing I'm looking for is if I'm going to get a Semmelsberger side, I kind of need that early finish upside. If I'm on Preston Parsons, I think 3 paths to victory, they all could score you over 100 points.
I think if Preston Parsons even comes out, Semmelsberger comes out a little bit hot in the first, and even if he wins the second and third, I think he still pays off his salary at 7,800 with the lack of real pure underdogs that I think you can get behind with confidence. And we talk about underdogs, and I'm clawing for win equity and trying to balance these things. And then we get to that next range. We talked about that mid range. We talk about the Batistas, Bunes, Lapalus, Bolanos. That's the next range I will kind of talk about here. And I got to be honest, through the week, I just keep getting more and more confident. Maybe I don't want to say confident, but I just think, why is Bolanos going to be such a big under? Why is there so much hype on McGee? Like, I guess he's got more tools. I know he's got more tools. We've seen it, but Bolanos is going to be so much higher level striking, I think, and he's probably going to have more power as well. I think if you're going to be playing, for upside, I think Bolanos might be one of the better plays down here. And then for like win equity, I think overall that Lapalus and Basharat, people will play Basharat. He's going to be lower owned compared to these upper Australian guys. He's only going to be 20%, but he's a guy that can spam takedowns. We know that. He's got to hit a ceiling, I think. He's got to get a finish. He's got to use the pitter patter, as we say all the time, to rack up a ton of fantasy points. And we talked on the Ground and Pound podcast. I'm going to talk about Mario Batista and Simon. I think that's in its own echelon of fights. That's an elite target because of the way that Simon fights. And we talked about that fight's going to be like split down the middle for ownership. I think people are going to be playing Batista because recency bias, Simon's chin potentially having some issues. Batista may be able to stop a couple takedowns. And if he does, he's immediately going to be in play. And then let's talk about that first fight of the night. I'm throwing a lot at you, Liam, but I'm amped up. I got to be honest. Felipe Bunes and Van here, a lot to prove for both fighters. I think both, need to come out hot and put on a performance to stand out in this flyweight division. So, there's 4 more fights where I'm going to live in for money line equity, right? Like, as I told you, it's difficult to really build a lineup with a lot of confidence. I'm looking and clawing for some plays.
I feel you, man. I'm looking at the Van fight as a potential showcase opportunity, right? It's a tough guy in Felipe Bunes. He's not an easy guy to put away. But what I have noticed about him over time is that he's started to fall in love with his striking a little bit. He's a primary grappler, but we've seen examples of him going out there against Formiga when he was overweight and just easily getting out grappled by a black belt himself in Formiga. So he's got good skills on the ground, but there's an old expression, right? You punch a black belt in the face, you turn him to a brown belt. I think that Josh Van is really going to try and unload damage on this guy and then take him to the ground and potentially submit him. If you listen to Josh Van, he's a very confident individual at 22 years of age. He says, I'm not afraid of this guy on the ground. I want to submit him. Whoa. Okay. That's a lot of confidence at 22. Is it delusional? I guess we're going to have to find out. But I think that everything I've seen from the kid, poise, ready to fight, shows up aggressive, faced some adversity in his last fight. By the way, I bet on Borjas there. I thought that was a good spot. And then he was able to deal with it, come back, and serve Borjas in rounds 2 and 3. For me, that's the kind of thing that tells me, man, this kid's playing for keeps, right? One thing goes wrong, everything doesn't go wrong. He can find a way to get back on track. And I think he's got a huge cardio edge. So when I'm looking at a fight like this, I say to myself, man, could he just turn up the volume like he did last time, by the way, throwing an insane amount of volume for this flyweight division in rounds 2 and 3. I think he could do that. But I also think this guy, Josh Van, has shown he's an opportunistic finisher on the regional scene. And I think that that's a potential way where he could differentiate himself in this flyweight division, go out there and get that first finish over a guy who's tough and been around a long time, but he's 34 years of age making a UFC debut. We don't normally see that go very well.
Liam, the ownership's showing Van is a little bit higher than Simon and definitely more than Basharat. I'm a little surprised by that because path of victory, right? We talk about Basharat with the takedowns. In Lapalus, I think if that fight ends up being competitive, I'd have to be leaning Lapalus side, like just for some win equity, right? Like maybe he has some more significant strikes on the feet. Maybe it's a close fight where, we have the grappler taking him down, not getting a lot of significant strikes. So that one could get you some win equity as well. And then talk to me about that Simon and Batista, because listen, everyone's playing that fight. That's going to be 30% for each fighter expected.
I think that this Basharat and Lapalus fight is a lot like the Preston Parsons Semmelsberger fight in some ways, right? Where you've got the clear binary. What's the difference? One is a massive favorite and the other is a very closely lined fight, right? So in this case, they're basically saying he's going to get the takedowns with the money line price, right? They're saying Basharat's going to go out there and get the takedowns. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the ultimate question here, because I just think that Basharat is an elite operator on top. Is he the best in the division? No, but he's very sound on top. He can pass the guard. He can control people. He can use his ground and pound. And when he's been taken down, he's found ways to reverse position, get back on top himself. So I think he's pretty damn sound, right? He went out there against Damon Blackshear, very good grappler, and was able to stick with him in those grappling positions. Taylor Lapalus is a primary striker. So if the fight becomes a striking-based fight, I think you're totally right. He's going to pay off his price. He's going to look like the side. He's going to win the decision. But that's kind of the way I see him winning this fight. He's got to earn a decision. He's got to fight hard. He's got to do things right. I think he has some knockout equity. I think it's limited, though, because of the division, because Basharat's tough as all hell. I don't think he's ever going to quit on himself. So for those reasons, I say to myself, man, Lapalus does have, a very narrow path, whereas I think the path is wider for Basharat. It's reflected in the number. I would almost steer away from that fight and hope, hey, can I get Lapalus to steal one round for me? That's what I would almost be rooting for. But I do think, if Basharat's getting his takedowns and having success, I do think there's a chance he could open up for a finish in rounds 2 or 3, whether it's with the ground and pound or with that submission. Lapilus never been finished before, but he also normally finds a way to stay off the ground. And I think that if he's stuck to the ground, that's where finishes open up when you're stuck in really negative positions.
Yeah, and that ownership for the Batista and Simon, I got to talk about it. You got to give me, like, Simon is our fantasy relevant guy. Any slate he's on, he has to be. He's just a wrestler at heart, control time, and the pace is always going to be there. But people are starting to get behind Batista. I'm a little bit surprised that Batista might be higher owned than Simon by lock. Does that surprise you at all? I mean, the thing is like, there's not a lot of people you can get behind. That's the problem.
Yeah, frankly, I'm an underdog bettor. Typically, that's what I like to do. I look for underdog money lines. I don't have a single bet on the money line on this card. I don't love the underdogs this week. I didn't love the slate overall. So when I'm looking at this, I say all that preface to say the one I was closest to firing on was Mario Bautista. He's on a 5-fight win streak in the division. Is he fighting the best guys in the world? No, he's not. But that doesn't matter, right? He's going out there. He's accruing experience. He's still a young guy. He's still bigger than Ricky Simone. And what is Ricky Simone's best skills and attributes? He goes out there. He pushes a hard pace. He's a pretty athletic guy. He'll wrestle you to the ground. That's about it, right? He's pretty good at what he does, but it's pretty basic fighting. Go out there, shoot takedowns, throw overhands. God bless. He's a wrestle boxer. They've been around for 100 years. It's like, all right, now let's look at and see what he can do beyond that. Because when he takes the steps up in competition against other wrestle boxers, he gets sent back down the ladder, right? Like we saw that against Uriah back in the day. And then Uriah's protege went in there and did the exact same game plan years later and strung him out with right hand. So I think that Ricky Simone, great fighter, and could look like the side here. Both of these guys have had moments in the past with fluky knockout losses where you're like, wow, did that really just happen? Didn't seem like the cleanest shot. He went down. I can't believe it. But when you look at Mario Bautista, he was young. He was in a couple spots where he didn't have the experience. He got to the UFC too early, frankly, right? He got called up. I think he was 6-0. And then he fights Corey Sandhagen in a UFC debut. Good luck with that, kid. It's like, this guy wasn't really given a bunch of favorable opportunities. So what did the UFC do? They looked at him and said, man, he's got talent. Let's set him up for success. Let's give him 3, 4, 5 fights that he could rattle off in a row. By the way, they did the same thing for Ricky Simone. Here's an older guy in the division. Here's some other guys that we think you could beat. Maybe you could give a good stylistic test to. But then when he got his step up, he lost. So now he's not in a position to take a step forward. He's defending his ranking. He's in a tough spot. That's high pressure. It's in the Las Vegas Apex. It's like, I don't think he's got a huge home field advantage. The crowd's not going to be rooting. What is the one thing that Ricky does that's going to separate him here? I don't know. Maybe he hits him harder. I don't know. It seems to me like it should be a pretty close to even fight. Yeah. And the one guy's got momentum who's a plus 160 underdog. It's just like, for me, that was a bit surprising. But maybe I'm just dead wrong. I mean, I know it's a change in class of competition, but Ricky Simone, most of the time when he steps up in that class in competition, he loses. I know he's got the win over Merab. It's not a win on my scorecard. I hate to tell you. But then you also look, what happened when he fought Rob Font? He just got exposed for being kind of average, right? Like when his game's not working, he just looks like an average fighter in the division. So I think he's got a lot of plus level skills and he could blow some guys out of the water. But I don't think he's going to easily out wrestle and out grapple Mario Bautista if Damon Blackshear did. So maybe I'm just misevaluating the talent, but
let's be honest. He will be there for the scoring. I mean, he's going to be right there in front of him. So Bautista's going to have to score if it goes that way. But this broadcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Crunch time, FanDuel. Bet $5 on any money line. Get $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus.
You got to bump up that speed. You got to bump up that speed, my friend.
Gambling problem. Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in Boston, we say 1-800-GAMBLER. But if I was getting some free bets, I don't think I'm going to be touching this biggest favorite on the card. TJ, we talked about this off air. Gene Silver is nearly 1,000-to-1 favorite late notice against Weston Wilson. Weston Wilson is going to touch like 2% ownership, Liam. I mean, 3-4%. Like nobody's going to want to touch this guy. And it's rightfully so. I mean, there's the ownership would draw me in. If I'm building 150 lineups, which I am, I have to have a couple shares. I have like 4%. I had to match the field just in case, Liam.
Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable. Weston Wilson's a guy that he doesn't have any great wins on his resume, but Gene Silva is also a guy that's relatively unproven, right? Like if Gene Silva was just a guy he had fought on the regional scene, I don't know that people would be that surprised. The difference is, though, one guy's out of Fighting Nerds. That's a really good gym. That's a gym where we know Kyle Barajo and these other people are coming out of looking good, looking like they're competent, they know what they're doing. And we've seen Gene Silva has some ground game, right? Which is where Weston Wilson's been trying to improve, going to new wave jiu-jitsu, trying to really do the damn thing. As a martial artist, I take my hat off to him. Guy who's still trying to get better this late in his career. But how much better is he going to get? And I think that the one thing that I would say that's really positive is he almost got a leg lock off on Joe Anderson Brito. I mean, that was really impressive. But also it showed he's very limited in how he's going to try and win these fights, because as soon as that started going sideways, he got his head punched through the canvas. And frankly, it's not the first time. Teruto Ishihara put him through the paces. That guy can't hack it in the UFC. So I don't really believe in Weston Wilson at this level. I don't think he's cut out for it, but I wish him the best. And I think that, frankly, he's got a short notice opponent, right? So if you want to just like paint a narrative for how this guy, Gene Silva, could fumble the bag, it's like he goes from being a plus money underdog to minus 1,000. Like red flag, right? He's on short notice, red flag. I think he's still going to crush him in the first round, but it's like when you start to talk through these narratives, like I can understand why sharp people are saying, hey, I'm willing to throw away this amount of money to find out, because Gene Silva isn't proven. So you are betting into an unknown commodity, and at a 98% confidence interval or whatever it is at minus 12x, it's just, you're playing with fire in a sport like this. So, man, I always say, whether it's a DQ, hey, root for this guy to run across and kick him in the nuts or whatever happens, get 100 points, quick win bonus, take it all.
Brundage. Cody Brundage is. I had some flashbacks.
Dean Barry, and Mike Jackson, one of my greatest cashes of all time.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be a first click for everybody, and if you're fading it, you're going to be puckered up for those first 60 seconds, because there's a legitimate shot of a 60-second bonus for that one, which is rare that you can actually say that with some semblance of confidence. But around this range, this is the tricky range, man, this upper echelon of fighters. And I talk about it. You've got Cortez, you've Costa, you've got Ankalaev, you've got Tom Nolan, who we're about to talk about, and that Gene Silva. So I just see Ankalaev and Silva are going to be the first clicks. Probably Nolan comes in right there behind, and then we're going to talk about Acosta, man, because Nolan's an unknown commodity. I'm not sure people want to get behind him besides that inside the distance. All Vegas is saying is play this guy, play this guy. That's what they're really saying. And what do we know? We really don't know a hell of a lot. This is his debut fight. And then you have Cortez Acosta against Andrei Arlovski, the king of split decisions. But Arlovski is getting so long in the tooth, man. And I think he's got a guy that's going to be a lot faster. The more and more I thought through this, Cortez Acosta might be one of the best pure fantasy upside play on the slate, Liam, because if he gets 1 million significant strikes off, I think the ideal situation for him is like a 4.5 minute finish in the first round, because he'll have like 40 significant strikes, a knockdown, control time. Like there's a lot of upside there. And then talk me through the Nolan, because Nolan's got a lot of ownership. I think if you fade that Nolan fight, you hope they kind of get like a second round finish if you're fading that one, which is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, man, I'll level with you. You just hit on probably my two most confident picks of the day. And now, am I saying like I'm super confident in these? No, I've acknowledged up front, not my most confident set of reads ever. But when I'm looking at this, Waldo Cortez Acosta is way younger. He's a way better athlete. He's faster. He's training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know if Andre does those things. So it's like, I just look at Andre as a guy who's been around forever and a long time, right? Forever plus some. It's like the guy is past his prime. When you start getting finished by Don'Tale Mayes, we're not in your prime anymore, right? We're well beyond that. Don'Tale Mayes, I think, would get absolutely embarrassed, truth be told, by Waldo. So if I believe that's the case, then I just think that what are we doing here, right? I think they're setting up Andre to get flatlined personally. But also, I think that the one angle that maybe people haven't talked about is Waldo does have footage on the regional scene of him getting on top of these guys that are regional bums and just passing their guard, looking okay. he's a baseball player at the time, right? Like he's been doing this for like 2 weeks at the time, and he's out grappling these guys because he's an actual athlete. If he wanted to, does he not take down Andrei Arlovsky? You remember when Tom Aspinall is just teeing off on him, gets himself exhausted, and then just goes, all right, screw it, and just takes him down in the second round. That's all it took, right? He literally made himself so tired that he needed to submit him and then submitted him instantly. So I just feel like Andrei Arlovsky doesn't really have it now. Not against these young guys, not against these fresh guys. He lost, frankly, to Jake Collier. It's over.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And what does it mean?
Oh, and as for Tom Nolan, I'll close the book on this one, brother, because I know we got to get out of here. Tom Nolan, I think, is a dangerous finisher, and I think Nicholas Mota is done. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I had to get a little crazy and play some Mota. And the reason being is I think he might be one of the better leverage plays on the whole entire slate, Liam, because if he gets his win, it's bound in that first round. It's probably going to be a banger for as long as it lasts. I don't mind taking a little bit of risk there. And yes, 100% agree with the Cortez Acosta. So you say there's not a lot of money line betting. We're going to get you into fantasy streets because this is how you can do it. You can build a portfolio out. Whatever you're going to do on the card, just put it into fantasy, Liam. We're going to make you a fantasy player by the end of the year. I promise this. Final takeaways before we get out of here. There's about 3 minutes before lock, but we're going to get out of here. Anything last minute?
God bless. Good luck. Enjoy those fights. Back next time.
Save some money up for next week. 2 5-round fights. Strickland versus Duplessis. Pennington versus Bueno Silva. That's awesome. We want 2 5-round fights. There's only 12 fights, but there will be some bigger prize pools. And if we don't win, we obviously hope you guys are winning. We will see you guys next week.